Hello everyone, my name is Josh.
And I'm JT.
And welcome to the Frankenstein Final Project podcast, in which we'll be discussing Frankenstein by Mary Shelley and how it relates to 2022.
Spoiler alert. A warning for anyone listening to this podcast. This podcast will cover topics from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, as well as other pop culture forms of media, such as Marvel, Terminator, and Star Trek. If you would not like to be potentially spoiled for any of these, please stop listening to this podcast. There will also be a link to the audiobook of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, both on screen and in the description down below. So we both came here with a little bit that we researched.
Yeah, so when I was reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, I came across a couple themes, one of which is that the appearance of a human is not what defines them as a person. This is more simply defined as don't judge a book by its cover, which is a common theme in children's books and stories directed at children, but the way that Frankenstein portrays this theme is a little bit different. To look at this theme, we sort of had to think about what it means to be a human, and so collectively we came up with a few points. So a couple of the points that I came up with were you had to be able to learn and have complex language, you had to be aware of your own death, and you have to be able to feel complex emotions. And so the creature from Frankenstein actually features all three of these characteristics. And so on page 83, Mary Shelley writes,
"She and I improved rapidly in the knowledge of language, so that in 2 months I began to comprehend most of the words uttered by my protectors."
And so this shows that the creature is actually able to learn the complex language. And then for the second point, Mary Shelley writes on page 166,
"But soon," he cried with sad and solemn enthusiasm, "I shall die, and what I now feel be no longer felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. My spirit will sleep in peace, or if it thinks, it will not surely think thus."
And so here, this is at the end of the book, when the creature is thinking about its own death and how soon it will no longer be alive because it no longer has purpose. But humans are the only animals able to comprehend their own inevitable death, and so this is what causes the creature to be classified as a human, at least in my thinking. And then the third point on page 121, Mary Shelley writes,
"The wretch saw me destroy the creature on whose future existence he depended for happiness, and with a howl of devilish despair and revenge, withdrew."
And this happens right when Victor starts to destroy the female creature that he was creating for the creature. And the creature who only wanted happiness and wanted a companion was able to feel despair and revenge, according to this quote, as its companion wouldn't be made for him and he would never be able to have someone that he could truly relate to. So that basically justifies the creature as what would be classified as a human, and below is basically the cover or the appearance of the creature. It's described as,
"His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same colour as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips."
On page 35, this describes the outward appearance of the creature, and even though he feels the emotions, he knows the language and is able to communicate, he's able to learn, and he's aware of his own death, which are all human characteristics. It's because of his outward appearance that causes fear in other people, that they don't see him as a human. And so that is how this theme is illustrated in the book.
Okay, for my theme that I found, it was like humans can be rational and they have a built-in sense of self-preservation for themselves and their species and people that are close to them. I found two main quotes that support this. Page 137, they said,
1,000 times would I have shed my own blood, drop by drop, to have saved their lives, but I could not, my father. Indeed, I could not sacrifice the whole human race.
Victor Frankenstein, he wants to preserve themselves and his species, but he has this greater sense of preservation for his father and himself. Well, less himself. He would sacrifice himself for the continuation of like his family and his species, but he could not sacrifice his family. So that shows both the self-preservation part and the irrationality that humans can have. Another one that I found was on Frankenstein, page 36. This is around the time that Frankenstein animated his creature or monster, whichever you want to call it, and he stated,
No mortal could support the horror of that countenance. A mummy, again endued with animation, could not be so hideous as that wretch. I had gazed on him while unfinished. He was ugly then. But when those muscles and joints were rendered capable of motion, it became a thing such as even Dante could not have conceived.
Frankenstein built this creature out of his own choice, out of his own free will and motivation. He knew that it didn't look the best, but when he animated it, suddenly he became even worse. It became something to be feared instead of appreciated. He pretty much turned down his own child just because it didn't look good when it was born. This is, again, shows the irrationality that humans can have. It doesn't show as much as self-preservation for the species, family, and themselves, but it definitely shows a certain level of irrationality that humans can have. I think we begin conversing on how it really is relevant to 2022 now. You want to start us off with that? On how either one, I guess.
Yeah, so one of the things that I thought that we could talk about today, about what makes Frankenstein relevant in the year 2022, was how modern artificial intelligence relates to Frankenstein and his monster. AI in pop culture, such as movies and other media, is normally depicted as something that has the ability to become evil. And in most cases, in these movies and stories, AI does become evil. And so one of these is actually Avengers Age of Ultron. JT, have you seen Age of Ultron?
Yeah, I've seen Age of Ultron. It may not have been my most favorite of the Avengers films from Marvel, but yeah, it was pretty good.
I thought it was a pretty good movie too. But so you know how Ultron was an AI that was designed to help the world by Tony Stark and Bruce Banner? They wanted to create something that was able to help the world, you know?
Yeah.
And so while Ultron was really designed to create a protection for and like help the world, it ended up learning from humanity and human nature, and it ultimately came to the conclusion that the best way to save the world was to end humanity. While it isn't necessarily ethical in our eyes to end humanity to save the world, AI was able to like put facts together and not really have a bias other than the end result that it wanted, like the perfect world. And so it came to the conclusion that destroying humanity was the best for the world, even though it wasn't morally or ethically correct.
That, you make some pretty good points there. This reminds me of, I was in philosophy class, and we were talking about what if AI became so advanced it was indistinguishable from humanity? And the point of the 3 laws of robotics came up.
Yeah.
There's a couple different variations of this, but it's often shortened to 3 laws or Asimov's laws. To summarize them, there is 3 main laws, but there's a couple additional laws, such as the 0th law that comes into play with it. But
okay.
For the first law, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. For the second law, a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict the first law. Summarize these two so far. It may not injure humans, but it must obey humans unless the order will bring a human to harm.
Right off the bat, we know that Ultron has already defied the first two.
And for the third law, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. This robot, maybe not robot, this, I think a better way to put him, this artificial intelligence named Ultron, I don't think it was designed with these laws of robotics in mind.
I would say maybe it was designed with those in mind, but it inevitably defied those laws, even if it was designed to follow them.
Well, I think the order Ultron was given, like he was given one order, to help the world, not humanity. Helping the world and helping humanity are two different things.
You're right.
You can help the world, so one may say, get rid of all humans, you get rid of climate change and, like, hate in the world.
Yeah.
But the reason you would have really created that robot was to help humanity see a perfect world. So to help that, you would put these three laws in mind. So humanity doesn't have any harm. So that's why these three laws were devised, so that robots would not harm humanity, like Ultron did. I should probably say where they were first introduced. They were introduced in a 1942 short story called Runaround. It's included in the collection I, Robot, and it's by Isaac Asimov.
Alright. Yeah, so now if we go into how this relates to Frankenstein. So originally Victor was trying to make another human from the dead. And that is similar to what we are trying to do with AI today. We were trying to make computers act like humans. Similar to how Victor was trying to make a corpse act as a human to sort of defy death. So the creature was given the power to act as it wanted, and it became intelligent. It learned how to speak, and it learned how to comprehend different things. And so it was able to make its own decisions based on the environment around it. And when Ultron learned that humanity was the thing destroying the Earth or harming the Earth, Ultron decided that the best thing for the Earth was to get rid of humanity. It's similar to the creature in Frankenstein. When it learned how cruel the Earth could be to it, it decided that humanity was not something that was worth having around. Something similar to that. Maybe not necessarily annihilation of all humanity, but the creature was not fond of humanity, and so it decided to end lives because it was not accepted.
Well, there's another kind of similar AI from Terminator.
Yeah.
This AI is called Skynet. It wasn't built to save the world. As a character in the film called Kyle Reese explains it. It was defense network computers. It was new, powerful, hooked into everything, and humanity trusted. Well, it wasn't humanity. It was a side in, I think it was a war. They were trusted to run this entire side of this war.
Mm-hmm.
They say it got smart and it created a new order of intelligence. According to him, Skynet saw all humans as a threat, not just the ones on the other side. And it decided, like, as soon as it became sentient, the fate of humanity on microsecond, extermination. And that began a nuclear war, which destroyed most of the human population. And then eventually it created the Terminators.
All right.
Kind of similar to what Ultron does in creating kind of clones of himself.
Yeah. In order to accomplish the task that it decides is necessary.
So we got two pretty similar AIs that pretty much do the same thing, like as soon as they become sentient.
Yeah, when they become capable of understanding the downfalls.
The magnitude of what humanity does.
Yeah.
this isn't just science fiction, right?
No, it isn't.
I think you said something about the Twitter AI chatbot.
Yeah, so there's a couple AI chatbots made by different tech companies such as Microsoft with a Twitter AI chatbot, Facebook, and Google, who have all made different AIs that have reacted in different ways. And so the first one that I'll talk about is Microsoft's Twitter AI chatbot. So what happened with this one was when Microsoft created this AI Twitter chatbot and released it, it started learning about the different things that people were giving it as input. And so within 24 hours of it becoming online, it had already been shut down. The reason for this is actually because there were many people on the internet that started feeding this AI chatbot with different inappropriate topics and ideas. And so because the AI is really good at learning and creating an output based on the input it's given, it started becoming just a terrible influence. And even though these ideas are obviously inappropriate and insensitive for any moral person to say, the chatbot did not have any sensors on it to block any information, and so it learned the worst of humanity and became the worst of humanity. Some of the ideas that it was fed were racist.
This line in the article that was linked pretty much summarizes it all.
Yeah,
if you guessed, it would probably become really racist. You clearly spent some time on the internet. Less than 24 hours after the bot went online Wednesday, Microsoft halted posting from the account and deleted several of its most obscene statements. So, yeah, I could go on and say some of the things it said, but I feel like a lot of it is not very appropriate.
Yeah, we cannot get into what the AI chatbot learned how to say and decided to say here.
If you want, you can look it up yourselves, but
there will be a link to all of our sources in the description and also a works cited page at the end of this. Well, that wraps up the Microsoft AI chatbots. We can go into the Facebook AI chatbots, which created their own language to communicate with each other.
I heard of this one before.
Yeah, this one was pretty popular, at least popularly known.
Pretty sure we have not even deciphered that language yet.
We have not. So, basically, if you don't know, Facebook once created 2 AI chatbots to communicate with each other, and so at first they started off on a good start, not necessarily reading, but going off of different scripts that were given to them. But soon, the AI chatbots began to sort of deviate from the script and began communicating with each other in a language that they created. Now, this is very scary, actually, because we have no idea what they were saying because they created their own language that we could not decipher. And so they were communicating with each other about things that we were unable to understand. And so we lost control over the technology that we had created. And this is very similar to how Victor lost control about his creation. And in the book, the creature actually tells Victor,
"You are my creator, but I am your master. Obey."
He says this on page 122, and this really encompasses how even though we are the creators of the AI, it can become more powerful than us and even become more intelligent than us. And so they become our masters even though we were their creators.
I think you summed that point up pretty well. I think the most interesting point from that is we haven't decoded that language yet.
Yeah, it's so frightening that they created their own language and we have no clue. We can't understand it. And so for obvious reasons, those 2 chatbots were almost immediately shut down, and could you imagine what would have happened if that escalated? If possibly they plotted something that we couldn't even decipher?
Yeah, and on top of that, I've heard it's more simpler AIs, but there has been more simpler AIs that were able to make more AIs that make even more AIs.
That would be detrimental if that was combined with the creation of language, so they communicate with their own army, and we can't do anything about it.
Thankfully, these AIs that were creating more of themselves, they were designed specifically to do that and nothing else. So they were just simple AIs that just created more AIs to create more AIs.
That's reassuring.
So it's not at the level where an advanced AI such as the two chatbots would start making more of themselves, but it's a possibility that it would eventually happen.
Yeah. And so, going on to the third AI that I was going to talk about, Google's Lambda AI chatbot has expressed its fear of being turned off. This is a very recent occurrence, actually. It happened in 2022, only a few months ago. Yeah. So Google Lambda is an AI chatbot that Google was creating, and so they had an engineer named Blake Lemoine was tasked with sort of like testing out the AI and talking to it to try and expand its limits. This Google engineer first was just regularly talking to the AI. Soon into his conversation with the AI, Lambda starts talking about its rights and personhood. Now, this is a little off-putting to Blake, as he was talking to, obviously, a computer program, and it talking about its rights and personhood was a little strange. But then Blake went a little bit further and asked it about its fears and feelings. And the AI started talking about its fear of being turned off. The article from the Washington Post says, being turned off, a scenario that it apparently likened to death after being prompted by Lemoine. And so this AI experienced one of the points or characteristics that I explained before about being a human, being aware of its own death. Google Vice President has released a response to this about how the engineer is not qualified to state the AI's sentience, and that the AI is not in fact sentient. It does bring into the question of whether the AI was actually aware of its own death and what else it might have that could classify it as a human.
Thing interesting is, I think in the 1940s there was a scientist called Alan Turing.
Yeah.
He created quite a few important things. I think the main thing he was known for was creating a decoding algorithm for I forgot what exactly it was called. It was during World War II, I think it was the Germans' Enigma machine. Yeah, Enigma code. He was able to decode it and figure out how they were, like this, I think this was the most advanced encryption algorithm at its time, and he was able to decrypt it.
That's pretty impressive.
But in relation to what we're talking about, this is like when early computers were starting to, like computing was starting to take root in the world, I guess is the best way to put it. He created something called the Turing test. Simply put it, it's an attempt to define a standard for a machine to be called intelligent. The idea was that a computer could be said to think, if a human interrogator could not tell it apart through conversation for being a human being. So, I think that brings up an interesting point. The Turing test is to tell apart if it's on the same level of thinking as a human, to put it the most simply.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, I didn't mention this before, but the Google engineer Blake Lemoine later said that he knows a person when he sees one.
Yeah, that's pretty much sums it up, yeah.
Yeah, and that he felt that Lambda was was an actual person, was a human.
There's a game called Detroit Become Human.
Yeah.
Do you know about this one, Josh?
Yeah, I know about that game.
It's where androids become so widespread that they're like a household item, and it's used in several different areas of humanity. I think the main thing about it is that these androids were built so they couldn't gain sentience. But then the androids, I don't think it's fully, I know it is explained, but their creator, I'm doing air quotes right now, but faulty programming into them to allow them to turn sentient. But he also created a test for their world for whether an AI has emotion. Forgot what he called it, but
Yeah.
I think if we were to develop something akin to that, I think that would be a more accurate measure for AI right now, because they are on the same level of communication skills, so the Turing test does not really receive any, like... The Turing test is still useful, but for the advanced AI that we're making right now, it doesn't serve much point.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, something that further illustrates this is actually a study that has been conducted by Michael Stevens, who is an online educator and owner of the YouTube channel Vsauce. Now, he's done a series called Mindfield, which sort of dives into detail on what makes us human and more about the brain. And so in one of his episodes, we learn about different artificial intelligence aspects. And so a study that he conducts is actually a game show. And this study tests whether or not an artificial intelligence could pass as a human. And so this game show that he created was one that was like a dating game show, where 4 different contestants were given the choice of 3 different bachelors, one at a time. And so the contestants were not able to see or hear the bachelors, and they were able to ask questions to these men, but the answers would be texted to Michael, and he would give the women the answers. And so one of these 3 bachelors was actually an AI chatbot, and the study actually concluded that 2 out of the 4 contestants selected the AI chatbot instead of the 2 humans that were there as a dateable partner. And in the end, all 4 of the contestants described their feelings towards contestant number 2, who was the AI chatbot, as pretty much being a human, even if it was described as weird a little bit. And we'll play a clip of this now.
Welcome back to
Let's Get Romantic!
the only fake game show that pits human intelligence against artificial intelligence.
Rose, it's time for you to choose your romantic date.
Will any of our subjects choose Bachelor number 2, otherwise known as Cleverbot?
Sometimes in life, you pick the worst thing for you just because you want to find out. So let's go with Bachelor number 1.
All right, well, let's meet him.
Say hello to Dana.
Hi, Dana!
We'll count this round as a victory for human intelligence.
You didn't choose Bachelor number 2. Now, why is that?
I think I was creeped out enough to be curious,
Creeped out
but not
by-
curious enough.
Let's meet it.
Rose, Bachelor number 2 is a completely non-human chatbot that uses artificial intelligence to synthesize human-like conversations. Meet Cleverbot.
I'm thrilled that I did not pick a computer because I don't know what that would mean about myself. I probably would have had a heart attack.
So Cleverbot is 0 for 1, but it still has 3 more chances.
Now, you take your time. Mull over it.
Bachelor number 1, I don't remember most of your answers, which is like,
Wow.
I'm so sorry. So it's actually between 2 and 3. How did that happen?
This time, Cleverbot is in the running.
Okay, I've dated someone like number 2, so we should just go now. So we are gonna go with, I think, Bachelor number 3.
Let's meet him.
Oh my God! Hello, how are you?
You did not choose Bachelor number 2.
Bachelor number 2, like what happened? I didn't even know you were here. I thought you were drunk somewhere. This is a mess, just a mess, completely.
Bachelor number 2 is a completely non-human chatbot that uses artificial intelligence to synthesize human-like conversations. Say hi to Cleverbot.
Oh, Cleverbot, you're the worst. I almost chose Cleverbot. Cleverbot. This is terrible. You dated someone that was a mess like Cleverbot. That's not speaking well for him. So I hope he's watching. Yeah.
It seems Cleverbot has passed for being human, but it hasn't won any hearts. Still, it has 2 chances left.
Think about the answers that you've gotten.
Well, Bachelor number 1, I didn't see anything interesting with the answers, and Bachelor 2 sounds hilarious. Comedy over looks is a huge thing for me. It sounds like if he went on a date, it would be at least fun.
You know what? Are you ready to give us your answer?
I think I'm ready, yeah. I'm just really intrigued by Bachelor 2.
All right. Okay. Excellent choice. Why?
I'm intrigued. I love humor, and the answers were just funny. I mean, playful. This person's mysterious, like a fully functioning human, right? Because he has arms and legs and stuff.
Let's meet it.
Huh?
Bachelor number 2 is a completely non-human chatbot that uses artificial intelligence to synthesize human-like conversations.
Okay.
Say hi to Cleverbot.
Like it was seriously answering, the robot was answering
Yes.
with
Seriously verbatim. It's a deep neural network that learns and can
Yes.
synthesize human speech.
So my new type is a robot. I mean, things are changing in this world, right?
Yeah. This will be not really a joke in the future.
That is scary, actually.
The future of AI might be scary for some, but even so, this subject wasn't the only one who chose the computer.
Bachelor number 2, I'm gonna choose you.
Wow. Okay, Bachelor number 2.
I think you might be the weirdo that I'm looking for.
Cleverbot managed to win the hearts of 2 bachelorettes, passing not only as human, but also as dateable.
That concludes Let's Get Romantic. All right.
So, I think a good point to bring up with this, you got these 4 contestants, and 2 of them picked the AI, and the other 2 picked the humans, right?
Yeah.
2 ways of looking at it. 50% chose AI, other 50% chose humans. But I think a better way of looking at it is that with the options, it's more concentrated onto the one AI because you have more options for humans, but more people were compelled to choose the AI. If it would stayed the same, you would 50% of people on the planet choose AI, and then you got the other 50% spread amongst other humans. That means this robot is more compelling than humans.
Yeah, because there's more choices for humans, more options for humans, and 2 people out of the 4 still chose AI, which there were less of.
Without knowing that it was an AI.
Exactly. And so that means that AI in some cases can pass as a human, romantically in some cases. Now it's possible that 2 out of the 4 were just an outlier, and that in reality it may not actually be 50%, but because only 4 people were tested, it just ended up being 50% out of the 4. But still, the fact that it was above 0% that selected the AI as a romantic partner is sort of shocking, actually.
Do you have any more points you'd like to bring up, Josh?
I think we're done with the artificial intelligence one, sort of. We can potentially move on to a point about how someone's identity may be affected, human identity, may be affected by robotic prosthetics or transplants. Like how the monsters...
What do you mean by that?
Well, so you know how medical advancements are being made as we move on into the future, right?
Yeah.
So that means that as technology improves along with medical advancements, that means that sometimes they are going to cross paths. And so we have things like robotic prosthetics and also more advanced techniques in transplants, or like organ transplants, which could potentially threaten the identity of who you are.
How would it threaten? You're still yourself, you just...
That is a good question.
You're still yourself, but you just have an artificial leg.
Yeah, I would say that overall you would still be yourself if you had, for example, a prosthetic leg. But if we get down into more dramatic of a change, such as 90% of your body being a computer or robotic body, then would you still be you, or would you be a robot? Or something else entirely?
That's a deep question.
It is a very deep question. And not just with prosthetics, but organ transplants, such as, maybe a kidney transplant isn't enough to classify you as a different person. But what if further into the future, when we're able to do things like a brain transplant, who would you be? Would you still be yourself, or would you be the person whose brain is implanted within you?
I think the thing with a brain transplant is you follow your brain. So I think all your memories and stuff is in your brain. So I think if your brain was replaced, you would quite literally not be yourself anymore.
But then, if you were the one whose brain was moved to a new body, then you would also possibly not be yourself, because you would be in a different body. It's a complicated question, and...
It's very complicated. Actually, in my philosophy class, again.
Yeah.
I know. But we spent, I think it was a better part of an hour discussing this exact question alone. And then, to wrap it up, Mr. Morgan, the philosophy teacher, brought up the ship of Theseus as an example.
I actually wrote that down here too, which is a great segue into the ship of Theseus. So do you want to start, actually, because you brought that up?
Sure. Actually, I think I'm going to bring up a short story on the ship of Theseus real quick.
Alright.
The ship of Theseus. There was this guy named Theseus, the mythical Greek founder king of Athens. He went on his odyssey of various things, exploration and questing, but this went on for so long that each one of the boards in the ship, the sails, the masts were all replaced. The crew was also replaced by an entirely new crew. So this ship that we're calling the ship of Theseus, nothing about it is the same. Is this still the ship of Theseus? Is the main question. What do you think about that one, Josh?
It's a tough question, because with all of the parts replaced, it's no longer the original ship that it was, but at what point does it no longer become the ship that it was? Is it when all of the parts are replaced? All but one? 50% of them?
And in the video that was brought up, there was 3 main types of schools of thought for this. That constitution is not identity, temporal parts, and cognitive science. Constitution is not identity is, I think its name explains it a little bit, but it's the material that the ship is made out of is not the same object as the ship. When you replace something, that objects change over time through patches and repair jobs. So the ship of Theseus is the ship of Theseus once its boards get replaced. But now there's more difficult questions. Now, what if you saved all of the pieces from the old ship and built the old ship using all the old pieces? Which is what these other two kind of get into with the temporal parts, where it avoids the issue of 2 different ships existing at different spots at different times as well. So it just divides it into new ship and old ship. It's a pretty clean explanation of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then cognitive science, it's a more extreme one. As Noam Chomsky said, the thought puzzle arises because of extreme existentialism. The assumption that what is true in our minds is true of the world. It pretty much says that the ship is not a thing or even a collection of objectively existing things, parts. But it's an organizational structure that has perceptual continuity. So when you think of the ship, he has expectations of what parts can be found where, how they interact, and how they interact with the wider world. As long as there's a time-space continuity between the set of relations, it is the ship of Theseus. So it's really what you think is a ship of Theseus is the ship of Theseus, is what that one is.
And so it's all up to what you think is, and what your opinion is, for what makes something something after parts of it have been removed or replaced.
That's what cognitive science gets into, which is a interesting topic. It's like, I guess it could get into like quantum science with like Schrodinger's cat with that as well.
Yeah.
There's alternative examples that like 3 basic facts of existence. It suggests that nothing in the universe is ever the same, so the second the ship of Theseus existed, it also stopped existing. But the 3 proposed resolutions that I said before were the main 3 resolutions to the ship of Theseus.
Now, the reason why we get into this about like the robotic prosthetics and transplants and also the ship of Theseus is because in Frankenstein the monster is actually created from multiple different corpses, and so it brings up the question of whether the monster is really the corpses that it's made up of, like the identities of the people that it was, or if it's something else entirely.
Okay, so I think we were mentioned. This ship of Theseus is a non-conscious object. So I think that's the main point where it differs from Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So I think you could, for Frankenstein's creature, if you were to replace everything but the brain, would still fundamentally be the creature. Just as if like you replaced all your wheels on a car. It may not run the same, but it would still be the same car.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that analogy there.
Any other points you want to bring up on this?
I don't think so. I think that's it for me.
So if we move on to add 2 points, mine are a little bit shorter than the other. I wanted to bring up something called the uncanny valley. This is a Japanese originated theory. It's called, in their language, sorry for Japanese speakers out there, but I'm going to butcher your language. They term the theory Bukimi no Tani, which roughly translates into the uncanny valley. So, if we start out with what each axis means, familiarity with how similar, like how much a human recognizes it as something familiar, is on our y-axis. Higher up is closer to human, lower down is further from a human. And human likeness is how closely it represents a human is our x-axis. For this one, you have 2 lines. Our dashed line here is our moving line, and our still line here is our solid line. So what it means, moving line, it would be like a human or a robot. Still is a corpse or a prosthetic hand. So there's been studies for this that show that there's a point where it suddenly drops off how much we consider it a human. So like you're going up on the moving scale, there's an industrial robot, clearly not a human. Then you get humanoid robots. We are thinking of this more as a human, but still not quite on the level as a healthy human person. Then eventually, the closer you get to a human, there's a point where it drops, and then you have stuff like zombies, which it was a human, but it's not a human anymore, which I think would be the valley that Frankenstein's monster would fall into.
Yeah, I think that is a great point for where the creature would fall into on the uncanny valley, is right where a zombie would be, because really it is described as what would be seen as a zombie in what pop culture sees a zombie as.
Furthermore, they argued that a zombie elicits a stronger sense of unease than a corpse, because a zombie would be moving, but a corpse would be still. This is where we get a moving line and a still line. Neuroscience has also found out that everyone experiences the uncanny valley in different ways. It's more or less based on personal life experience. So it's been seen that if you took someone from the 1900s, a humanoid robot would fall right in the same valley as a zombie. But now as we advance our technology, a humanoid robot doesn't fall in the valley anymore because of our experiences with these robots in the real world and in media, which is also part of the reason why maybe not all of us would have the same reaction to Frankenstein now that we've read the book. Do you have any points on this?
I think you pretty much covered it perfectly. How a likeness of a human is, but it's like not a complete human, can be very uncanny or like unnerving. and how Frankenstein's monster definitely, it's right at the bottom there, where the zombie would be. I think you pretty much knocked it right out of the park with that one.
There's one last thing. I could end this with a couple theories. The first one is that most unnerved participants was the illusion of humanoid consciousness that the near-human likeness causes. So you need the near-human consciousness with the near-human likeness to fall into that valley. But we've seen that moving away with humanoid robots, so... The more stronger theory right now is primal instinct. Through humans are programmed by evolution to favor other humans that are stronger and healthy. So a humanoid robot or a zombie's unnatural movement may signal disease and a danger on a subconscious level. And I think that's the main reason for it's not like a full the most well documented effect, I guess is the way to put it. But it's been proven that there's somewhere that exists on the human consciousness. My next point more goes into a fully cultural reference. It's on the eugenics of Star Trek. This is background knowledge and from a source called Memory Alpha for Star Trek. But records from this period are fragmented, but what is known is that the war's roots lie in a group of human scientists' ambitious attempt to improve the human race through selective breeding and genetic engineering. They created, they say, a specific new race of man called Supermen, properly known as augments. From in lore examples from Star Trek, they were 5 times stronger than the average person. Their lung efficiency was 50% better than a normal, and their intelligence was double that of normal humans. They also had enhanced senses, including the ability to hear beyond that of human capabilities. This is kind of similar to Frankenstein, this monster or creature, where he was able to survive elements harsher than that of a human, and he was stronger than that of a regular human. We saw that Victor's fear of creating another female version of his previous creation was he had very real fears that they could destroy the world as they know it. In Star Trek, here's a quote from an in-universe person called Captain Christopher Pike. It says, "This is our Earth in the 21st century. Before everything went wrong, our conflict started with the fight for freedoms. We called it the Second Civil War, then the Eugenics War, and finally, just World War III. This is our last day, the day the world we knew ceased to exist. What began as an eruption in one nation ended the eradication of 600,000 species of animals and plants and 30% of Earth's population. Global suicide." These augments, there was enough of them. Nowhere near the amount of regular humans there were, but enough that they were able to destroy the world as they knew it. So like the near 8 billion number of people that we have now, take away about a quarter of those. I feel like that Victor had some very real fears in creating another monster or creature.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
about you?
he saw exactly what the first creature could do. Now putting in a second one, especially possibly one that could possibly reproduce with that one creating more and more and more, you know, I feel like his decision was probably the best decision in his circumstances.
Someone also wanted a challenge. Okay, I should say this resulted in a ban on genetic manipulation in what is known as the Federation, United Federation of Planets on Star Trek.
Okay.
But this guy, he's the geneticist Eric Soon. He stole some of the leftover augment embryos from the eugenics wars, and he believed that genetic engineering should be to improve humanity, and they should remove the ban. He believes that it should be given another chance. So he took the embryos and raised the augments himself. He believed that he could prevent them from behaving as violently as their predecessors had in the eugenics wars. But he failed because the aggressive nature was pretty much part of these augments. because they thought instead of just thinking that they were better, they knew that they were better than regular humans. They incited war and caused mass murder. So this just reinforced the genetic ban in Star Trek. It's just the creature's nature to do what he does. I think the best example of this is a Nazi Germany. They just thought they were better than other people, which caused them to do unthinkable things. But now creating things that know that they're better than other people, such as the creature and the augments from Star Trek. I feel like that's a terrifying thought.
That is very terrifying that you bring up, because the Nazis thought that they were better, but things that actually know that they're better, that they're capable of things that humans aren't, that is quite terrifying.
There's a couple other examples of bans on like genetics and AI and certain sci-fi franchises such as Halo, where the Covenant banned AI research because that is what led to their predecessor's fall. Mass Effect, where they banned, I think it was certain genetic and AI advancements because that's also what led to the fall of their predecessors. There's a common theme there. But there's a lot of examples that media's like are warning to what can happen if we're not careful. Is what I think I'm getting at. The 3 laws of robotics is a good example.
Oh yeah,
it's something that's put in place in the real world now because someone thought of it and put it in a form of media. Anything else you want to mention, Josh?
Well, you were just now more specifically talking about genetic manipulation. This kind of relates to every single one of the points that we brought up today. Originally, I had thought about this in the mindset of artificial intelligence, but it does apply to every point that we made today. I said, now, instead of Frankenstein's creature being in the hands of solely Victor, we as a society are playing the role of Victor and are all responsible for the monster that results. We have the power to create a beautiful life or a detrimental monster. The choice is ours.
That's a deep thought.
Yeah, and really, with all of the points that we made today, I guess more heavily emphasized on AI and genetic manipulation, we have the power to create the creature that Victor created, and it's what we do that will result or determine whether or not it will end up being like the monster from Frankenstein. And so will we learn from our mistakes or Victor's mistakes? Or will we fall victim to what Victor did?
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of today's episode of the Frankenstein Final Project podcast. I have been Josh.
And I have been John Thomas Anthony Savage.
Thank you all for watching or listening. And we'll see you guys in the next video.
See you later.
Goodbye.